So, where are you from, please?
Okay, I'm from Lagos, Nigeria. I'm Uchechi by name, Uchechi Eze, founder Eulexia Support Initiative, one which is saddled with the responsibility to offer remediation and intervention and also create awareness for dyslexia.
Is there a lot of awareness in Lagos?
Yes.
Is it quite a liberal, forward-thinking place?
Nigeria in general, I can say there is, say, 10% awareness about dyslexia in Nigeria. So for Lagos, I know of a few organizations that are into it, but the awareness level is still very low because I get to find out every day that a lot of people don't know about the word dyslexia. They can relate when you explain, but they can't understand it. They don't know the word dyslexia.
So they don't know the word. And it seems to me that if you don't know the word, you don't know the concept almost.
Yeah, yes. So because I don't know if it's because of the pronunciation or something, but when you begin to explain what dyslexia is, they can relate. But when you say dyslexia, they go like, what's that?
Yeah.
And then I'm like, okay, this is what happens with school owners. It happens with educationists. It happens with class teachers. So you can imagine if a class teacher doesn't know what dyslexia is. You just imagine what happens to the children.
So you have to raise awareness. So how do you go about raising awareness in an environment where no one knows what it is?
Okay, so for us at Eulexia, we're more of online right now because the initiative started in January this year. And, the whole up and down with the COVID, we've not been able to go physical for now. But we've been online. We have our social media platforms where we do this. And then I've been on quite a few number of shows, TV shows where I talked about dyslexia. And then I've actually collaborated with some YouTube channels to talk about dyslexia. So right now we're studying online and we're hoping, we had plans for last quarter of this year to do some offline activities, schools and local governments, but the lockdown hasn't helped.
Yeah. So the fact that you've been on a couple of TV shows, it seems to me that if you've been on TV shows, there's interest in the subject.
The thing is, I get to be called with people close to me. So the TV show I was on was from a friend.
Okay.
He's on my contact list and he sees my WhatsApp status. He sees my posts I do every day on my status and on Facebook. And then he's like, oh, he hosts a particular show and he would want me to come and talk about this thing.
Yeah.
And then that's how the show came up. So 2 times I've been on a TV show. It was by a friend. So you see, sometimes these things is not really, a lot of people don't know. Somebody won't just wake up and call you up. It will be somebody that has seen something you've done about it or seen something somewhere and then can relate it to you.
But I mean, I guess a TV show has at least the potential to reach beyond just Lagos and into the other towns and cities in Nigeria. Is that true?
Yes. So the TV show is actually aired, it's actually aired on DSTV and Good TV. But then it's not on a very, known platform, I would say. So that's why the reach has not been so much.
Is this important? Because please educate me about Nigeria. It seems that Nigeria is going to have some really big cities and different areas of Nigeria are going to have maybe smaller towns or villages. Some areas of Nigeria are going to be populated. Some areas are not going to be populated. How does it work in Nigeria? Do you get different levels of population, different levels of government, different levels of money, different levels of education, that kind of thing?
Okay, so for government, we have different levels. So we have the state government, we have the local government, you see. And then for education, we have private schools, and then we have the government schools. And first off, the government hasn't really bought into the whole idea. We've been trying so hard to break it into the government, for them to recognize that this thing actually exists, trying to, especially the Ministry of Education, for an inclusive education system or education curriculum for the children. And the point is, even the government doesn't know. So for Nigeria, majorly, the first thing that needs to be done is awareness for Nigeria, because the government doesn't know, or maybe they know and they're in denial, or they know and they're not ready to implement. We understand our education sector, the curriculum we use, we understand that a lot of things needs to change. A lot of things needs to be implemented. So I can't really say that one sector is getting the information and the second and the other is not. Even the private schools that are owned by private individuals, that you would think they would be all out to make sure every child is being attended to. You realize that they don't know these things. And even when you bring it up, they want to assume that the teachers can do the remediation.
So there's a problem with teacher training as well. So if the teachers aren't being trained,
Yes. So the thing is, there's no inclusiveness in the curriculum, and then there is no inclusiveness in the teacher training program.
Right.
So if your teachers are not trained for special education, how then would they be able to help a child they find in their classroom? So take, for instance, statistics has it that 1 out of 5 kids is dyslexic. And in Nigeria, 80% of individuals don't know about dyslexia. And then you have teachers not knowing about these things. They don't know how to go about it. Some of them feel this child is lazy. I've heard a lot of teachers beat kids. They beat them to the point where some children come home with scars. And then you find out that these children, it's not that they don't want to learn. It's just that they're having difficulty learning. And you're not providing them with the right environment and the right materials to learn. And then you are stigmatizing them. You're making them feel less of themselves. You're affecting their self-esteem. I've had to train some kids, and I've had to see how it has affected them so much, to a point that I felt so bad. Now, what made me go into dyslexia is that I used to work with a book club. I used to work in a bookstore where we do Saturday book clubs. I read education, so I had the play for teaching, but I read I read biology education, so it was more for the grown up, for the teens. But I found myself in a book club where I had to deal with children. Sometimes you just realize that you can have a switch, in things that you really didn't know you were able to do. I didn't know I would have had patience for kids, or I would have wanted to teach children. But then, I found out that when I started working with them, they were so sweet. And there was this particular family. They had 2 girls, and the 2 girls weren't able to read. They weren't able to spell, and they were going to good schools. So I took up time to look at the girls. I was very interested in them because why? I saw them one day, they cried because they failed some spelling. So in the book club, we read, and then we do other literacy activities. And then we had a session where we're doing spelling, and the kids failed everything. So what I noticed with the children was that they weren't spelling what I was pronouncing. They were spelling something different.
Okay.
So it was very funny. I was wondering what was going on. So it made me I took them aside and had a one-on-one training with them too. And it wasn't working. I was teaching them, but they weren't getting it. So I decided to look it up and say, okay, what could be the problem? That's how I stumbled on dyslexia. And then in Nigeria, we have it with parents. The challenge mostly is with parents because most of them are either in denial
Okay.
or they feel it's a spiritual problem. Yes, or they feel the child is just lazy.
Lazy, yeah, yeah.
So some parents will tell you, oh, he or she, no, she will get over it. No, she would outgrow it. No, when she gets to primary two, she'll pass it. Don't worry. And these things, the more complex it gets, the more the child is having issues. And the early detection of dyslexia is the best way actually to help this kids. So I went to the mom and I told her that, okay, your child has something that is not normal,
Yeah.
is special. We need to help. And the mom was like, okay. She was receptive. She bought the whole idea. But then it was very difficult to convince the dad.
Why are the parents so against accepting dyslexia in their children?
Okay, so the thing I've realized over time is that our parents, during their time, a lot of decisions were made based on their ability to read and write. In the 90s, it was more of demonstrations and oral, express what you know. But right now, you have to write exams. You have to pass. You have to express yourself in pen and paper. You have to read something for people to know that you actually have the knowledge of this thing. And that is it. So they feel they don't know that this thing exists. Most of them don't know. And some that know, they don't want to accept it so that the child doesn't feel stigmatized. They don't understand. They feel maybe that it's a brain problem, or they don't want to accept that child has that thing. They feel the child would work his or way around it, and they keep beating the child or pushing the child so hard. And then the schools also are not helping. So the two major problems we have in Nigeria are the parents and the school. Because this a school where this child is not doing well and you keep passing that child, you're damaging the child, because the child would come out from a primary school without knowing how to read, go into a secondary school without knowing how to read. And then maybe because the parent has the money, and a lot of private schools are ready to take your money and ready to pass your kids. And then you see this child after secondary school, he or she still can't read. And then she goes into the university. And, at that point, you are left with your books. You have to read. You have to pass. And then they can't. And then there is no mommy there. There is no daddy there to help you, to pay your lecturers.
Yeah.
And you find a lot of them, when they try, they fail, they end up becoming nuisance in school. Some of them say school is difficult, they drop out of school. You find out that the dropout level is very high. You find out the drug addiction rates for young people are high, because some of them, they can't do schoolwork, and then they find, peace in drug. They just feel like, oh, I can't do this thing. Maybe when I'm high, I can, they end up feeling inside they want to do it. They are trying, but they just can't. That's the thing, they can't. No matter how much they try to, they can't, because there is something that needs to be corrected first. It has to be done from the root.
So what is this thing that needs to be corrected? What's wrong with the way that teaching is delivered that can be changed in Nigeria?
First off, Nigeria, as system of education, we have to know that every child is different. Yeah. How will I put it? We are so used to the routine way of teaching, that you bring a bunch of kids together, you just give them, just write on the board and they copy. And then you realize that if 2 or 3 out of these 10, 20 kids already understand the concept, you just move on. as a teacher, you're not paying attention to each child. And sometimes you won't blame the teacher, because sometimes they too, they're overwhelmed with the whole class size. So the problem, is many. Really, the problem is that we need to change the education system, the curriculum, at least. Then we need to inform the teacher. Teachers need to be informed that if a child is going through this, then there should be a remediation curriculum, or a special intervention plan that this child should use. Teachers should understand that a child's level of assimilating things can be different from the other child. And so you don't stigmatize the child, or you don't talk down on the child just because the child is not learning that way. The teacher also has to know that you have to infuse other learning styles while teaching, so that you can include all the kids. So there are some kids that you write on the board and they're fast, they grasp it. There are some that you have to do hands-on activities, before they learn. There are some that you have to give them extra time before they can understand.
Yeah.
So that is one. So if I'm going to itemize it, I'm going to say that first, our ministry has to understand that this thing is real. Dyslexia is real. A lot of them feel that parents or we dyslexia advocates are just, are just coming up with stuff. I've had a teacher say to me that I've seen the training they do in a dyslexia center is not so different from what we do in school. It might not be too hard. She might not understand. Or maybe the other centers that she has been on might not understand. But I know for Dyslexia Foundation Nigeria that what we do is entirely different from what they do in school. So what we do.
How is it different?
Okay, so what we do at Dyslexia Foundation is that I work with the Dyslexia Foundation Nigeria. What we do is we first test the cognitive skills of each child. So there are 7 cognitive skills, and if anyone is weak, it affects the child's cognitive, it affects the child learning, it affects the child, however the child will process information. So we get a test done. I don't know, I'm sure you've heard of Gibson test.
Yes.
The Gibson test tests the cognitive skill, right? Mm-hmm. So that's one part of testing we do at the center. That's like an entry level for every child that we run a dyslexia test. So the Gibson test gives us an insight on the weakness and the strength of that child. It gives us an insight on the level that child is operating. The child might be 10, 12, but his cognitive skill might be operating at 4, 5. Now, when we begin to train, we don't train just the reading and writing aspect. We train the child's cognitive skills to improve it. Because by the time you improve the child's cognitive skill, the child automatically begins to pick up. Take, for instance, a child that the auditory processing skill is low. There is no way you want to teach the child sounds that the child will understand or remember or recognize it. So by the time you begin to train the auditory processing, and the auditory processing skills are being strengthened now, and then you begin to infuse from the scratch. Now we go all the way to the very beginning, and we begin it. You see that because the cognitive skill is already strengthened, the child can easily begin to, to get this thing. We've seen it work, I'm not just saying this out of book or theory. We've practiced it, and it has worked. We've seen testimonies. Even the founder had a son that was dyslexic, and that was how he found the remediation, and he brought it to Nigeria. So you see, a lot of teachers, what they do is the rote learning. They just keep feeding the child, and they don't realize that child, it's not that you're teaching that child. No, that there is something wrong. The root of the problem is that it's a cognitive skill that is weak, that needs to be strengthened. So we don't just do the training for short-term goal. We don't do it just for the child to just learn how to read. Else we'll do memorization. The child can memorize some things, but how about when the child faces complex things? That's the problem. If the training is wrong, when complex things come up, that child won't be able to scale through. That's the thing. So a lot of that's another reason why we have late detection in Nigeria. Parents are in denial when they spot these things in their kids, because the first set of people that would discover dyslexia in children are the parents and the teachers. Teachers don't know what it is. Parents don't know what it is. See the trend, and then the child keeps, oh, my child is not, how can I be paying such amount of money in your school and my child is failing?
Yeah.
And then the teacher is like, oh, he's not passing, and the school owner is like, pass him, and they keep going, and that child, they don't know they are damaging that child's future, because the child begins to feel, oh, it's okay even if I don't know this thing, and it keeps going and keeps going and keeps going, and when the child has to be on his own,
when you said earlier on
and do things by himself,
the number of young people who fall into drug-related problems, for instance, I wasn't thinking of these people as young people who fall into drug-related problems. I was thinking of them as those two children you met in the book club. And when we think of these people as children, these are sweet, innocent children who will grow up to potentially have drug-related problems, mental health problems, homelessness. It's tragic and it's heartbreaking when that happens.
When I was in school, I know a lot of people that would say, oh, I keep reading, I can't remember. After reading, I pick up the book, I can't remember everything. It looks all new to me. I really didn't understand. I haven't come across dyslexia then. I kept wondering, there's some people I see, they can't even copy from your book. I couldn't comprehend it. I'm like, this thing is right in front of you, just write it, And then imagine those people, if they couldn't get help. They would feel like a failure. Most of the hoodlums you see on the streets, most of the people that drop out of school, most of the people that turn into drug users, most of them, check the rate, 90% of them are attached to the fact of having one learning challenge or the other, especially dyslexia.
Yeah.
Because you can't even do well in math if you can't read.
Yeah.
You have to understand the question before you can solve it.
Yeah. You can't do math.
The only
part where you can't do geography, you can't do science, you can't do anything. Languages. Yeah.
And you know what really hurts me is the fact that these people, if they had help, it would have been better.
Yeah.
The case would have been different.
You also say that the education style is very European, so people have to do this European education. Is that always appropriate for a Nigerian context? So if you have a European education system and you get maybe, I don't know, a town in the northwest of Nigeria, which is not like a European city at all, it's more like what you would call an African town. Is it appropriate that children are made to go through a European style education system, or does it work for them? This idea of you're putting children through a particular structure of education with an exam system that examines them on particular requirements and gets them to a university. And, this sort of very almost like industrial version of an education system. Is this always appropriate for a Nigerian context?
Okay. Okay, so as right now, as an educationist and a dyslexia advocate, I would say that system needs to be reviewed.
Okay.
You know, because a lot of kids can sometimes a dyslexic child knows the answer, and every examination has to be written. There is no inclusiveness. That's the thing.
Yeah.
How about the child tells you the answer, oral?
Yeah.
You know, how about the child shows it to you? I went through school too, and I know that practical examinations are most time not used.
Yeah.
90% of your score and assessment is based on examinations, written examination, and you do practicals. You know, so you realize that the system is just a one-way thing.
Yeah.
If you don't know how to write, you don't know how to read, and you don't know these things.
And as the Dyslexia Foundation seems to be doing, if you're teaching people to learn, and yet people are being tested on their ability to do an exam, that ability to do an exam is not the same thing as the ability to learn. And so if we're teaching people how to learn and then testing them on their ability to do an exam, that's an inappropriate thing to be doing to them.
For us at Dyslexia, we don't just test or how to do things.
Yeah.
So the dyslexia aspect, the dyslexia assessment is done orally. So we test all round, oral, written, hands-on. So that, and then the testing is not for us to assess, for us to give a pass mark, or for us to grade, you know, for us to know the level you are coming in. The training is not by writing. The training is not like exam.
Okay.
A lot of parents come in with a lot of goals, and that's another thing. A parent that brings his or child to the center for training would think the child is learning when the child begins to write. We think the child is improving when the child begins to read. You see, so we know these things. We know that assessing a child doesn't necessarily have to be by writing. Yeah, all other ways we do it. But we also have to improve the child's writing and reading. We also, for us to do that, we also have to know the child's strength and where the child is weak. You see, so we take assessments to have information on what the child is coming in with. And then we begin to help the child get better. And the help is an all round. You know, it's mentor, it's hands-on, it's reading. When I talk reading, I mean sound recognition.
And
then ability to blend.
What sort of effect does this have on the lives of the children that you come into contact with?
Oh, I've had a child say that that was one of the best things that's happened to him. You know this feeling when you couldn't do something and now you can. You know, there's this self pride. You know, there's this, and then as a teacher, there's this joy. I say kids come in not able to do something, not because they don't want to. They tell you that I don't want to do this thing, I can't do it. And the first thing we begin with is positivity. Make them understand there is nothing you can't do. And it's okay to fail. You know, it's not just okay to fail and accept failure. So it's refreshing when I see the kids begin to get better. We've had children or teens that go through our program and they end up studying abroad, because most of the parents say, oh, I want my child to be able to compete with international kids and all of that. So you hear them, you give testimonies. They say, "Oh, I'm better." Even the teachers begin to say, "Oh, okay, what are you doing to this child? Because this child is getting better." And you see a child, he's smart, he's able to, to express himself. People that weren't able to talk, they're always shy because they've been talked down on a lot of times. So when they are living, they live more better, more fulfilled, more proud of themselves, able to stand with their peers and talk. And it's for me, that's the joy. That's really why I am training.
Yeah.
That's it for me.
And that seems to be the complete opposite of the idea that the schools don't know what they're doing and the parents don't want to know about dyslexia.
Yes, and even when the parents knows, the parent doesn't want to do anything because too scared of societal judgment. And even those that come in, they are very discreet and they're like, "Oh, I don't want to know. I don't want anybody to know. I don't want anybody to do this. I don't want anybody to say this."
Yeah.
We really, really, really need to do a lot of work in Nigeria when it comes to learning struggles, especially dyslexia. There's a lot to do. And God's willing, I and my NGO were doing our best, and we are pushing for the government to also recognize this thing, because they are the ones that would implement these policies. They are the ones that would put in this curriculum. They are the ones that would, imagine one state in Nigeria accepts this thing, recognizes that this thing exists. Other states would begin to see reasons to do the same. There are lots of dyslexia. When I put up things on my status, people come on my DMs to say, "Oh, I think I'm having this. Am I sure I'm not having this?" And I'm like, "Get assessed. There's nothing there." And it's like, "No, don't worry." I don't know. I really don't know, but God will help us.
Yeah.